Okay, so the goal of this experiment is to see what happens if you suddenly change the throttle setting on the airplane without moving the stick, that is, without moving the elevators at all. So the aircraft is trimmed at about 2,000 feet altitude. We're doing about 124 knots true airspeed at about 2,100 RPM. And the aircraft's pretty much trimmed out. I'm holding the stick tightly between my legs, and what I'm going to do here is I'm going to advance the throttle to full, and I'm just going to keep the stick jammed between my legs, and I'm going to try to use the rudders in order to just keep the wings kind of level. Make very small aileron movements if I need to, but basically make sure that the elevator doesn't move. Now, when we put the power in, when we advance the throttle, we might think what that's going to do is make the aircraft speed up. Let's test whether that's true. So 120 knots airspeed, 2,000 feet altitude. I've got the stick jammed between my legs, and I'm smoothly advancing the power to full. And I find the airspeed isn't really changing. It's still 120. We do have a 600 foot per minute, 700 foot per minute climb going now. The airspeed's gone to about 118, 117 knots now. 900 feet per minute climb. 112 knots. 800 feet per minute climb. 600 foot per minute climb. Airspeed 113. So we started at 120. And we advanced the throttle, and the speed really hasn't accelerated. Instead, we just have a climb going. Right now I'm climbing at 670, 700 feet per minute, airspeed 115. So if the intent of advancing the throttle forward was to accelerate the aircraft, that has not worked. We're at 115 knots. We're at about 500 foot per minute rate of climb. Now I'm at 119 knots. So you see the aircraft is working its way back to that original trim speed. It has not accelerated one bit. And I've got now a steady state 600 foot per minute climb going. So the observation or the conclusion from this experiment is that the long-term effect of changing the power setting on the airplane without moving the longitudinal control effector, that is the elevators in this aircraft, is to basically start a climb, is to change the flight path angle of the aircraft. I've got 120 knots back. I've got my original airspeed back. And we're climbing at 550, 540 feet per minute. All right, now the goal of this experiment is to see what happens if you move the elevator on the airplane and then hold it in position without touching the power setting. So without moving the throttle lever, if you just move the elevator of the airplane and then hold it in its new position, what happens? Okay, let's point towards clear sky. Now obviously we associate moving the elevator with basically climbing and descending. So let's see if that's indeed the case. The aircraft's at 3,500 feet altitude, 2,300 RPM engine power setting. We're doing about 135 knots true airspeed, 127 knots indicated. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to move the stick a little bit and then jam it between my legs and hold it there. And I'm going to try to use the rudders to keep the aircraft, wings level, and I'm going to try not to make any aileron movements at all, lest I inadvertently move the elevator. So I'm going to move the stick, i.e. the elevators, and then jam the stick between my legs and hold it there. All right, so let's start the experiment. About 138 knots, 2,300 RPM, 3,500 feet, and move the elevator and jammed. And I'm just gonna sit here. So indeed, we are climbing 1,000 feet per minute, 1,300 feet per minute, 1,600 feet per minute. The airspeed is bleeding off. 99 knots, 94 knots, 92 knots. Okay, now the nose is coming down. Nose is coming down over the top now, and oh, we're actually descending. Now we started descending at 300 feet per minute, 400 feet per minute. The airspeed's 105. I'm just going to try to keep the wings level here. And now the nose is coming back up again. 300 feet per minute, 500 feet per minute, 600 feet per minute, 1,000 feet per minute. Airspeed coming back 95, 92. Remember, we started at almost 138. Okay, now coming back over the top now. 800 feet per minute, 600 feet per minute, 300 feet per minute, 100 feet per minute. What you saw over there was the phugoid cycle playing out. 300 feet per minute. Okay, we've got 92 knots airspeed. 500 feet per minute. We're seeing the phugoid damp out. 400 feet per minute. 200 feet per minute. 170. So we're not really climbing much at all. 170 feet per minute, about 200 feet per minute. But the airspeed bled off from 138 knots to 103 knots. So we had more of an effect on the airspeed than we did on the flight path. So the long-term effect of moving the elevators without really changing the engine power setting is to actually change the equilibrium speed of the aircraft.